Welcome back. We're now entering Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is one of my more favorite chapters that we do in this class. It's all about culture and population, why people live where they do, how people live, um, why people do things that they do. Some of my more favorite topics to talk about. It's more interesting than the past stuff we've been over, all that foundational work that we've been doing. So let's move into the first part of Chapter 3. The first part of Chapter 3 is called demography. I'll explain what that word means in a moment, but this entire slideshow is devoted to the study of demography and what it is and how it relates to geography. The main idea for this PowerPoint is that the study of human geography focuses on a number of population topics as well as many cultural topics. That's actually the main idea for this PowerPoint and the next one we do over culture. This PowerPoint is going to focus more on population topics, also known as demography. Here are your two essential questions that we will answer in this PowerPoint together. The first one is, why is population density distributed unevenly around the world? And then number two, what are some possible effects of population growth? There are several effects that population growth has had on the Earth, and we're going to look at each one of those. Here we see a quote from the textbook that introduces you to human geography. There are essentially two types of geography. Physical geography, which is the study of all the physical features on the earth, like landforms, bodies of water, resources, anything physical that doesn't have anything to do with humans making it. Second part of geography is human geography. This is the study of people and how people live and where people live on earth and how they live there and the things they've created. So let's look at this quote. Geographers are interested in people as well as the physical environment. Human geography includes a wide range of topics such as the study of languages, religions, customs, and economic and political systems. So from this point on, we're going to be more talking, or most of the class will be devoted to talking about human geography. We're going to study countries' languages, their religious beliefs, the customs, that's their traditions, why are certain things that they do to make them unique, as well as their economic and political systems, how they govern themselves, their trade patterns, and stuff like that. Human geographers study two things: demography, which is what we're going to be talking about in this PowerPoint. Demography is simply the study of populations. They study topics such as birth, marriage, migration, and death. Demography is it's numerical based. They're more counters, whereas cultural geographers are people that study the beliefs and actions that define a group of people's way of life. They're more looking at the why part, like why do people act the way they do? How do people live? Those are the things that cultural geographers are more concerned about. So let's start talking about where people live on Earth, and then move into why people live on these certain places. All known human beings currently inhabit the Earth. As far as I know, no humans live on Mars or Venus or anywhere else. All humans live on Earth. Earth has a total population right now that is over 7 billion, but I don't think as of yet we've hit 8 billion, so we're right in the between 7 and 8 billion. Geography often plays an important role in where people have chosen to live on the planet. Almost half of the Earth is unlivable because of these 3 points. 2/3 of it is covered by ocean or some type of water. You can't breathe underwater, you can't live there. Some of the land is either too cold or too hot. You wouldn't want to live in the Sahara Desert because it'd be too hot. Or you wouldn't want, on the other end of things, you wouldn't want to live in Antarctica. You would freeze to death very quickly. Some lands have been historically unreachable due to harsh terrain. Either they've been heavily forested, they're mountainous, large expanse of desert, things like that. Large parts of Asia historically have not been populated because they're either mountainous or they're too desert-like. Most people share a very small part of the total Earth in what is known as the temperate land. Temperate land means that they have access to fresh water, they have tolerable weather, and they have fertile soil for growing food. Most people live in the northern hemisphere, between the equator and 60 degrees north. So if you look at that map and find the equator, and then go all the way up to the north at 60 degrees, people live in between that line and 60 degrees. The equator and 60 degrees is where most people live. Since the majority of the world population shares this small patch of land between the equator and 60 degrees, it is said to have high population density. Population density is the measure of people living within one area. Since most people live in this area, population density is very high. The average number of people living in a square mile is the technical definition for population density. Population density, there's two population density formulas. The first one is total population divided by total land area. It's okay to use this one, but there is a downside. It can be very misleading to use this one in certain countries because not all countries have temperate land within them. For example, in Egypt, most of Egypt is desert, which means not a lot of people are going to live there. So when you use this formula, total population divided by total land area, you're going to see that Egypt has a very low population density. Whereas in reality, the areas that are populated in Egypt are actually very heavily populated because they have to live in such a small space because the rest of the country is desert. So it's better to use this formula, total population divided by arable land area. Arable land is just farmable or livable land. So this is going to get you the more accurate population density if you were to try and find one. Yes, you could use the other one in most countries, but like I said earlier, countries like Egypt, Libya, Saudi Arabia, even China in some parts, you're going to want to use the second one because the first one's not going to get you an accurate total because the land in those countries, not all of the land there is arable or livable. Here are the four most dense areas of the world, or the heavily populated ones: East Asia, South Asia, Europe, and East North America. All of these areas have one thing in common, or at least one thing in common, is that they're all heavily urbanized areas. Urban just means that they have city populations. So most people living in these four areas of the world are going to live in mostly cities. Now the opposite of urban is rural. Rural just means they have a country has a countryside population. They live in the country. So you've got urban on one hand, which is city population, rural on the other, which is people living in the country. The area that we live here, live in the South, would be technically rural because we don't have major cities outside of Memphis and Jackson. So we technically do live in a rural area, even though we live in the third largest city in Mississippi. Here's our first stop sign for this slideshow. I like this video. It's the evolution of human population in cities over 10,000 years. It's a TED Talk for high school students. The lady in this video, it's kind of a cartoon, but she's narrating it. She's going to explain to you how cities developed and how cities have influenced human population, human culture, and how cities have affected the environment. So please go and watch this. You will have questions about this video on your quiz when you go and take it on Edmodo later. So please, please, please go watch this video. So now we have to talk about people living on Earth and how they're affected or by human-environment interaction. People have always had to adapt to the environment. Remember, human-environment interaction talks about people adapting to the Earth, modifying the Earth, or changing the Earth in some way. For example, native peoples living along the equator in South America and Africa had to adapt to that surrounding by not wearing heavy, dark clothes, or in some cases, hardly wearing any clothes at all. A lot of Native American tribes in South America, when they were discovered by Europeans, did not have concept of clothing because it's hot there. You don't want to wear a lot of clothes and cover yourself and sweat to death. So that's one way that humans have had to adapt to the place they've chosen to live. All right, then over the course of thousands of years, humans have also altered the Earth. On the flip side, while humans have to adapt to the Earth, we also adapt the Earth to us. One way that we've done that is by raising animals, animal husbandry. Humans have both eliminated and created new species of animals and plants to suit their needs. I believe the statistic is that 90% of the species on Earth no longer exist because we've either bred them together and created new species and bred them out to extinction and created a whole new species, or we've hunted them out or killed them off. The next way that humans have altered the Earth is that we have harvested minerals, trees, forestry, and we've also had to farm the Earth for food and resources. Humans have had to choose to either stay or migrate away from areas based on the amount of usable or adaptable resources. This is another way that we've had to adapt to our environment. If the area that we are living in now suddenly runs out of the resources that we need to continue with our way of life, we have the choice to actually get up and move to a different area that is more suitable to our needs. Humans have done this for thousands of years, migrated around the Earth. Today, it's not as common, but there are certain cultures that still do this. They stay in one place for a little while. Once that place runs out of resources for them, they'll get up and they'll migrate somebody or somewhere else. So let's answer our first essential question. Why is population density distributed unevenly around the world? I've made a little chart for you to look at that answers this question. First reason that population density is distributed unevenly around the world is that almost half of the Earth is unlivable. So if you remember back to the beginning of the PowerPoint, that's the first reason. Half of the Earth is unlivable. Either it's water, desert, or mountainous, and people can't live there. Second reason is humans have had to choose to either stay or migrate away from the areas based on the amount of usable and adaptable resources. If there are no usable resources in an area, people will not live there. They're not going to have a hard time, or they're going to have a hard time surviving in a place that doesn't have the resources that they need, or the tools that they need, or basic shelter that is needed for human existence. Third reason that population density is uneven is that we live on a very small amount of temperate land, or there is only a very small amount of temperate land that meets all of our needs. So that's one of the reasons that we're unevenly distributed. There's a whole swath of land around the Earth that is not populated by humans. Therefore, we have congregated all in this one little patch between 60 degrees north and the equator, and the rest of the world doesn't. If you were to look at the rest of the world, it would look very uneven in terms of population. And the last reason is that most people choose to live in urban areas instead of rural areas because it provides easy access to resources. If you remember from a few slides ago, we were talking about urban versus rural. Most people choose to live in urban areas because it's easier to access basic resources and basic necessities. So that kind of goes back to the second reason we were talking about a while ago, is that humans have had to choose or either stay or migrate away from the areas based on adaptable resources. So these are the 4 reasons that density is unevenly distributed around the world. Here's another video. You will actually get to see in this video how population density is distributed around the world. It's a population counter. It shows you where people have lived and died over the course of, I want to say 2,000 years, but I'm not entirely sure. So you want to go watch this video. There aren't questions on the quiz about this video, but it will help you understand, or at least give you a visual of population density over time. So I do recommend that you go watch this. Here on this slide, you can start seeing statistics about population growth. This is going to relate to our second question that we have to answer. You can see on here that since 1960, we have been steadily rising in population. In 1960, we had 3 billion people living on Earth, and it's expected by 2040 that we'll have about 9 to 10 billion people living on Earth. Here are some important terms that you need to know. Birth rate and immigration. The birth rate formula, this is to figure out the birth rate of countries. It's the number of live births per 1,000 people. It's a good indicator for how fast a country is growing. Then immigration with an I is people who are moving into a country. I am moving into a country. Then you got death rate and immigration with an E. The death rate formula is a good determination or a good factor for seeing how fast a population is dying off or how slow a population is growing. So it's the number of deaths yearly per 1,000 people. Then immigration with an E are the people who are leaving a country to go somewhere else. So people leaving Nigeria are immigrating with an E, but they're coming to America. Once they come inside to the United States, they're immigrating with an I. So what happens when the birth rate and immigration rate equals the death rate of a country? What actually happens is they cancel each other out, and you get something called zero population growth. If the birth rate equals the death rate, then the country's population is not growing. And usually what will happen then is that it will actually have a negative population growth, and people in the population of that country will actually start going down. A lot of countries in Europe and Asia are actually experiencing this right now because their populations are not reproducing fast enough, and more people are dying. They have what's called an aging population. It's not necessarily a good thing. Because you want your population to grow in order to sustain your country. Here's another video. I believe there's 1 or 2 questions on the quiz about this video. I like this video. It is by Hank Green's SciShow. He's going to talk about the science and the effects behind overpopulation. He talks really fast, so if you have to rewatch the video a couple times, please do so. But it is a good video and explains a lot about population and the positive and negative effects of overpopulation. So, essential question number 2 was, what are some possible effects of population growth? You have one positive effect that demographers think will happen, and it is that levels of technology and creativity should increase as more people are forced to live in close quarters. So it's kind of like when we talked about the theme of movement. Movement is simply the exchange of goods, people, or ideas between places. So what this is saying is that as people start moving together and living closer together, they'll be forced to rub off on each other or share their technologies with each other to make life better. So that's actually a good thing about the soaring population growth that we're seeing or we have seen over the last 50 years. 2 negative things that demographers think are going to happen is that there's going to be an increase in sickness and famine. We're not going to be able to feed 10 billion people once we get there. And then the second thing A depletion of natural resource quickens. We're already losing natural resources faster than we can replenish them in terms of fossil fuels. We're losing those faster than we could keep up with. But some demographers think that as we get towards that 10 billion point, we're actually going to start seeing a depletion of renewable resources. We're going to start using our renewable resources faster than they could actually grow back, or we can recycle them. So some very negative effects, or some effects that you might want to keep in mind as you go through life. Things about recycling, how you live your life, to make sure that you are helping the earth and not hurting it. Now that we've finished this slideshow, you want to go and take the Edmodo quiz for 3.1 Part 1. It's not a very long quiz. I did give you a time again. So make sure that you've gone through this PowerPoint, you understand it. If you need to go through it several times before you take the quiz, please do so. I'm telling y'all, if you're going to take those quiz and have the PowerPoints open, you aren't going to have time to finish. Because you're going to be looking for the answers, and you're going to keep reading and reading and reading, and you're going to get stuck on this one question, and the timer's going to go out, and you're going to blow your whole quiz. So make sure you understand the information, then close the PowerPoint, and then go take the quiz. Don't try and take an open note quiz, because you're going to end up running out of time. If you have any questions, email me or wait until class.